All right, welcome back. And for our latest project, we're going to be taking a look at this very nice old Kenwood KRC-2000. This is a viewer submitted unit. This comes from Zach. He lives in Virginia. And he got in touch with me a very long time ago about having a look at this for him. And it's been so long that I had to text him today to get him to remind me what was wrong with it. And as the story goes, he pulled this out of an old Jeep in a junkyard and got the radio home, hooked it up, and didn't use an antenna, but he said he did get some noise out of all four speakers. From that point, he decided he was going to open it up and use his air compressor to blow out some of the dust in the chassis. And then from that point, he took the radio into some repair service in his area, and they were going to do some free testing on it, whatever that means. And from that point, they told him the radio was dead. So I'm not sure if the radio went dead while or after he did the compressor or after he took it to them. But we'll find all that out once we get it opened up and see what's going on with it. As always, we're going to come in, we're going to have a look at the controls and the features of the radio, as well as the connections they provided in the back. As for our intro music this time, we're going to go back to 1983 for Dawkins' masterpiece, Breaking the Chains. This would be their debut album, and of course our first introduction to George Lynch. And every song on this album could be my favorite song, but we're going to listen to a little bit of one of my favorites. This one's called Night Rider. Goes great with the theme of the whole car audio thing. So let's check out a little bit of this, and then we'll get started on the Kenwood.
The engine runs, strapped and tight, I'm locked inside my door. On a midnight run. Who knows when danger lies around the bend for me. With the morning sun passing by faster than the speed of light. Night rider. You better run, look out now, 'cause here I come. Night rider, 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 night rider.
All right, let's go ahead and come back in and we'll have a look at the controls and features on the unit. Of course, this is the traditional shaft style radio, very popular in the 70s and the 80s. And on the left here, you're going to, of course, get the power switch built into the volume control, as well as the fader, the balance, or excuse me, the fader, the bass, and the treble, pushing in on the volume control to get the bass, pulling out to get the treble, and then the second stage is the fader. Cassette deck located in the center, of course, eject on the left, fast forward and rewind on the right. And then you're going to get a few features here with this one. Of course, band select, noise reduction, local and metal tape capability on this one, a few indicator lights there, 6 presets for your AM FM stations. And then the right hand control is going to be your tuning, manual, and seek. If you want seek, you have to push the button in. And then for memory, pull it out and push the number you want to store it in. And then balance is going to be the outside part of the control. The fact that he got this with the original knobs and the trim plate is amazing. I think I may have mentioned that already. We're going to flip the radio around, but first, before we do that, we'll take a look at this paint that someone has put on this, 1552 PPP, apparently, is what that is. This yellow paint seems to be the universal coding or ID method of junkyards. Even in my area, I've seen that before. We got a few wires here. The first thing we'll do is take a look at the little box here that has your choke filter, and both of the factory fuses are intact on this. You got your red wire, which is going to be your switch 12, yellow constant 12, and then black for the ground. And then you're going to get a few other wires. I'm going to assume the blue one is going to be for the remote lead or antenna lead. And then we got a white, a green, a gray, a yellow, or excuse me, a orange, a blue, and a red. So we got a common ground for the 4 speakers. If I had to guess, and it would be a guess on my part, we'll know more once we get the radio opened up, I'd probably say that maybe the gray would be the common ground for all of these. Although the 6th wire I'm not so sure about, unless that one of these would be for illumination. We're definitely not going to dump a a speaker connection across this red or orange wire until we check and make sure there's no voltage there. But once we get inside the radio, we should be able to look at the fader control, and that will give us a really good idea of which 4 of these really are the speaker wires. So I think the first thing we want to do is let's go ahead and get that installation kit off of it and get it opened up. And let's just take a quick look at the bottom and the top and see if we notice anything burn up or out of place right away. And then from that point, if we don't see anything, we'll go ahead and bring some power up and see if we get any sound out of it. So give me a moment for that and we'll pick back up. All right, let's go ahead and come back in. I was able to get the radio apart, front or top and bottom covers, as well as the front nose piece, the installation kit that he left on when he shipped it. And I went ahead and pulled the cassette mechanism. We'll need to do that anyway. Just kind of taking a quick look at it. Both of the pressure rollers seem to be savable. Not in the best shape in the world, but they seem to be savable. Looks like maybe even the original factory belt is still on this. If you take a look right here, of course, not sure how well the camera will agree, but you can see the 2 belts are still intact there. It looks like there's a smaller one for maybe fast forward and rewind and one for play. And they both seem to be intact. So hopefully we have an easy time with the tape mechanism trying to get it going. The first thing I wanted to look at was right here. Get something to point with, the AFPO or amplifier IC. This is a Toshiba one. And I'll see if I can get you in here. It might be a little tight. I doubt I'll be able to get you in to see the number on it, but I believe it is a 7271P Toshiba amplifier. And I was looking to make sure there wasn't a hole blown in that before I even try putting power to it. I didn't see one. That doesn't mean it couldn't be shorted, but I don't see one. Then another thing we want to take a look at is right where all those speaker wires come in, right here on this board where the volume and the fader control is. And we got a good look at everything being labeled and laid out pretty well. And it looks to me like the orange wire is the front right, the red wire is the rear right, the green is the front left, the blue is the rear left, and then the gray and the white are both grounds. So the 2 coming out of the back here are both grounds. When I was doing the radio features clip, I did not mention the fact there's a DIN plug here for preamp out. Given the fact it still has this plastic cover on it, I'd venture to say I was probably the first person to ever take that off. So doubtful that that was ever used. Another thing we wanted to do is we want to take a look at the solder side of the board, in particular in that area right where the AFPO IC is at. And I do see quite a few cold solder joints here, but I don't see anything burn up. Everything is, traces seem to be intact with the exception of a few that are losing some of their coating. And now as I look at it, I'm starting to question whether that one's burned or not, but I don't think it is. I think they're just losing their green coating. This was sitting in a pretty harsh environment for all those years, and that will certainly cause that to happen. So I think the first thing we want to do, now that we know that we have a IC that doesn't have a hole in it and we know what our proper speaker color codes are, let's go ahead. I'll put the cassette back in it. I'm sure it probably won't fire up or not fully produce sound without the cassette being hooked up. Let's go ahead and bring it up on the power supply and see if we get any sound. So give me a moment for that and I'll pick back up with you. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up. I went ahead and capped off the front wires, hooked in some speakers to the rear wires of the fader, capped off that power antenna lead, and here is what we got. I mean, I got some audio there. It sounds to me like it's in AM instead of FM, but I could be wrong. I got no control over the tuning. And when I hit the band select, it don't do jack. Oh, there it goes. Still doesn't give me any control over anything though. So it could just be that switch. It might be a little dirty that's causing that, but that still doesn't give me any sound on the radio. When I push in here, I do not have any seek. I also wanted to mention I didn't have any right channel, but as I'm messing around with this, the right channel is cutting in and out. So I think we definitely got some loose connections. Let me go ahead and turn it off before we do anything crazy, although the power supply wasn't drawing anything on that. Let's go ahead and flip it over and we'll examine the bottom of the circuit board again to see if we see anything. I did spot a couple on that AFPO that looked pretty bad, but there's probably way more there. So I'm going to take a good look at it off camera, and then I'll bring you back and show you what I found out. Picking back up with you, went ahead and got the radio flipped over and got the camera set up for the overhead shot here. And I was looking over here at the connections around the AFPO, and there is two here that are not really connected. But the bigger thing that I didn't notice is right here, and I'm not sure if this camera will agree or not. Maybe right there. You can see that ground that contacts the frame to the board is broken away. There's also one here that is as well. And one here. So looks like all of our grounds are kind of broken away here, including this one. This one doesn't look much better either. This one right next to the AFPO. So just for the hell of it, let's solder those up real quick. And we'll see if that improves our situation any. I would imagine without a working ground that could certainly affect the tuner or several other circuits. That looks pretty good there. Let's go ahead and resolder this while we're here. Because there are several connections here that are broken away. This isn't going particularly good. We may have to remove all the old solder from this to get this to really take hold the way it's supposed to. Sometimes if it doesn't flow with the old solder that's there, just removing that old solder will make it flow a lot nicer. So I'm just going to take it all off, and I'm going to go to a thinner diameter solder and see if we can get these. All right, let's go to a little thinner piece and see here. Oops. See here if we can get this straightened away. Starting to look a little bit better now. Well, that didn't look good. There we go. Looked like there may have been a piece of the pin that was breaking off. Hopefully the lead of the chip hasn't broken completely off. All right, that should be good for now for that one. Let's spin it around and let's do these ones over here. A little heavier gauge solder for this. Not saying that this is the problem, but I am definitely saying it is a problem, but don't know if it's the problem, I guess is what I was trying to say. There we go, that should do it. All right, let me get the camera off of the magnifier here. I'll flip it back over and we'll see if we have a winner for getting the radio going at the very least. So give me a moment for that and we'll pick back up. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up after we soldered up everything underneath, all the grounds and connections around the amp IC. There was one of the grounds I believe I missed initially, but I did catch it when I went back and reviewed the board. So everything ground-wise has been soldered up just fine, and so has the AFPO in this. So I'll show you what I found out. Let's go ahead and we'll turn it on. So I did get my missing channel back, so soldering up the amp IC took care of that, but I still have no tuning on FM. But I do on AM, so let's switch it into AM here. And I'll go over and flip the lights off with all these fluorescent lights. This thing hates that. Let's do that real quick. So yeah, we got good AM, but we don't have any FM. But I decided to do a little bit more digging. The first thing I wanted to do was just to see, based on what I could see on the tuner over here, if we had anything loose there. I can't see all of it, but I can see a good portion of it. I didn't see anything obvious, but I did discover this. Let's switch it back to FM. And that switch is going to need to be changed. All right, so we got static here. Well, let's go ahead and heat that tuner up a little bit. There it is, locked in stereo. Had to heat it up a little bit, so I'm not sure if what I'm heating up, is a cap that might be dormant, or maybe the IC. It looks to be like a 24-pin IC in the back of this tuner module. But the next thing we're gonna need to do is pull this out. And this is gonna have to come out of the board for us to really get a good idea. First, I can't tell what's on the other side of it other than a bunch of coils. but we're going to have to see what's in there. So hopefully, what would be ideal is if we have a cap that is just obviously bad with ESR meter and we can change it and get it working. But if there isn't anything obvious, then what we might have to do is we may have to run jumper wires from the tuner into the main board so I can work on it outside of the frame of the radio. That'd be the only way to really determine to component level what it is by heating things up. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that tuner out, and we're going to have an inspection or take a look at that, give it a good inspection and see if there's anything obvious. But otherwise, locked on stereo, it will work if you heat it up. So I'll go ahead and pick back up with you, and we'll continue on troubleshooting the tuner here. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up and get you caught up on what's going on with our KRC-2000 Car Stereo we've been working on. And we're fast forwarding down the road about a week or so since the last clip was made. And at that time, we had determined that we had AM, but we didn't have any FM. And so after checking through the supporting circuitry, capacitors in particular, I was looking at those. And at this point, I've checked nearly every capacitor in the radio, and I haven't found one bad one yet. And that's from the lowest value all the way up to the highest value. But I did notice once I started heating this module up right here that the FM would kick back in. And so I had made the decision I was going to pull this module out and maybe and use jumper wires and see if there was something intermittent in the module. Couldn't spot a cold solder joint from this angle of the radio without taking it completely out. So I went ahead and took this out, and when I got it out and looked at it, I realized it was just an AM tuner, not an AM and FM tuner. And of course I did notice this piece over here, but I was thinking more along the lines of antenna RF versus an independent FM tuner. So I went ahead and removed this one after I put the AM back in, installed my jumper wires, and then I could start heating it up and I could get it to kick in and kick out. And so just to determine whether I had a bad component, intermittent component, or a loose connection. So basically what I found on this is several cold solder joints around the frame, but it wasn't the grounds that were causing the issue here. It was a pin over close to where I have this jumper wire, which is the antenna lead of the tuner module. And I found that, got that fixed, and it's been in my garage here for about the last 3 or 4 days, and I've been periodically coming out here and testing it to make sure that it's working. Because anytime you have something intermittent that you can get to come back to life with heat, you don't know if is it a connection problem or is it a component problem. So I wanted to make sure we did a thorough testing of that. And so it does work. Let's go ahead and turn it on. And so it's been working just fine, and I think I'm at the point now where I feel confident we can go ahead and put that back together and put it back in the radio the way it's supposed to be. But anytime you have a situation like that, this is really the best way to determine what's going on, is to go ahead and run these jumper wires and start heating it up and determine if you have a component that's intermittent or a loose connection. And just because you see a loose connection, that doesn't mean that's the issue. That's why you need to do this. You need to take this step just to make sure. And it's been a while since I've resoldered a tuner module, but I resoldered the entire thing, and it took me back to the days where I was taking IF packs out of Sony TVs and resolder them, or resoldering tuners for TVs versus car stereos. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get that put back together and get it back installed, and we're going to start working on the front here. All these micro switches aren't working, and we're going to go ahead and get those changed out, and to where you don't have to push hard and push several times to get them to activate. And there's a couple of display lamps that's also out. We're going to change those. And then from that point, we're going to call it a part 1 on this. And in part 2 of the video, we're going to do the mechanism. So I'm going to go ahead and get the camera set up overhead. And then from that point, we'll start working on the display. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up real quick before we start working on the front panel of this and swapping out the momentary switches. Went ahead and got his FM tuner put back in the unit. At the same time, I noticed that he had issues with the factory antenna connector from this radio. The ground of it is really frayed and breaking apart pretty much 80%. Just a few strands of copper left on it. So I went ahead and swapped it out with a different one. using our screwdriver there as the antenna. One other thing, let's go ahead and flip the radio over here. There was quite a few cold solder joints throughout this entire radio, not just in that tuner module. But if you take a look here, I haven't resoldered the whole thing, but pretty much everything that was fairly critical. I went ahead and redone this flex connector going to the LCD display in the front of the radio. Everything, of course, over in the RF section. Everything behind in the power supply and the amplifier, and a few things over here. Didn't get them all, but I got all the ones that I thought were going to be an issue down the road. So before we start on the display, we'll go ahead and fire it back up one last time. We know that the amplifier in the radio is working just fine. Let me go ahead and back this up a little bit. We know the amplifier is working with no issues, so what I did is capped off all those lines for now. Went ahead and got his preamp connection, which is this DIN plug, and I made my own little female connector with RCA cables on it that I run into my bench receiver. So let's go ahead and plug in the tape deck. We'll need that working in order for the radio to work, or need it plugged in at the least. And we'll turn the speakers back onto the bench receiver, and we should have some FM here.
Year where we give thanks to those that have given so much to Sean's Auto Service. First and foremost, the potholes in the Quad Cities. Thank you for keeping the tire service busy all year long. Second, the used cars.
So I don't think he's going to have any issues at all with the tuner. Everything seems to be stable there, and it's been thoroughly tested on and off over the last week or so, just to make sure there wasn't anything else going on. So I think we can safely move on to the front panel switches and then on to the tape mechanism. Went ahead and replaced the two wire ties I cut out so we could get a good look at the fader, so we could get our proper speaker outputs. So I'm going to go ahead and get some switches lined up and see if we can start swapping some of these out and get this working the way it's supposed to. Currently, what you have to do is you have to push on these several times, actually very hard, to get them to work, especially these first three right here. These not so much, but we're going to see if we can swap those at the same time. And also we have two lamps that are out in this radio. We're going to change both of those too. So give me a moment for that. We'll pick back up and we'll get started on this last portion of the part one of the radio. All right, let's go ahead and come back in, and I went ahead and started disassembling the front piece here, which is not a big deal. I think there's just a couple of screws, and then the shield that goes around the lights and the switches comes off, and then you can get the board loose. So I started looking at what I had available for switches, and the version that's in the radio, which is the one that's on my left here, this is the version that's in the radio. It's a 4-pin switch. The only ones I have available in 4-pin version is the one on the right. And as you can see, the bodies are a little bit different. And that's not the only thing. The resistance of the switch, the amount of force required to push down on that button, is harder than the one that was in the radio. So that could be a possible situation for fatiguing the plastic buttons on the radio and breaking those. So we don't want to do that. But I thought I would try the switch body to see if it would work. So that was my idea of going ahead and removing a couple of these. I went ahead and took the first two switches out of the radio, and you can get the substitute switch in with this body. The only problem is you can get it in there, it'll go in and you can solder it up. The only problem is that when you get ready to put that shield on there, if you went ahead and populated 3 and then the rest of these switches, that shield would have a hard time fitting on there correctly because the body sizes are so small. So I think what we're going to do before we go ahead and decide we're going to try to source some new switches, which we probably could still get. It'd probably take a little research to find the right body style. These switches are absolutely repairable. I wasn't going to do it since if I had new ones to put in there, but these are absolutely repairable. You can clean these switches up. So you ain't going to be able to clean them up with them attached to this. You're going to have to take them all out of this. But I think I want to try that first. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do one with you on camera here just so you know how easy it is to remove them from one of these flexible circuit boards and get them all out and spray each one individually with control cleaner and then let them sit in some control cleaner for a little bit. So what we're going to do here And I just have the radio propped up kind of at an angle with the cassette case there. But obviously you want to be as careful as you can with this circuit board. It's got some flex to it, so it ain't to the point yet where it's so frail that as soon as you bend it, it snaps in half. But it wouldn't probably take too many messing around with it too much to get it to the point to where it would start to kind of crack and break. So you want to be especially careful with that. I know that once I'm done doing these switches, before I even decide to put all this back together, I'll probably run some continuity on some of these traces just to make sure that there isn't any kind of a breach there. But as far as taking one of them switches out, not a big deal. See if I can zoom you in here. We're going to concentrate on the third switch in the line. Should be okay right there. Yeah, the third switch in the line is right here, so we'll go ahead and take that one out. And even though, like on this, the second switch here, one of the pins is not even soldered in. So not going to get lucky on this switch. All 4 pins are soldered in, but I think only 3 pins are used. So what my method is just kind of bring in a piece of solder wick and hold on to the board a little bit while I'm doing this, so I'm not pressing down extremely hard on that. And it'll wick it right off. And then I've been kind of just trimming the solder wick as I go along, so I've got a clean piece on each one of these, so I'm not applying excessive heat to it. There we go. Reset my cassette case here. Looks like it's slipping on me. But yeah, it's a little bit of a time process to do it. That's the last thing you want to do is put too much force on that board and cause it to rip. It would be doable to repair the traces if they were to rip, but it wouldn't be fun to do it. It's doable, but not fun. And then we got 1 pin left here. Let me trim this off. And I've been going back along and kind of cleaning up the flux off the board, which gives me a little bit better visual to see if I've done any damage to it. But if you're taking your time, you're not going to create any kind of a problem. There's a lot of solder right here because I believe that's where the lamp is at, right below it, and I'm draining off a lot of that too. But that should be good enough. It should come out. And it's this third one right here is what we're looking to remove. There we go. So, yeah, there's a lamp right above that switch, which we'll be changing anyway. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of these removed and get these things cleaned up a little bit. And then we're going to let them soak for a little bit. And then we're going to put just 1 switch back in over here on the left for the band, get the radio turned on and see if that switch is responsive. And if it's responsive, then we'll put a second one in. If that's responsive, we'll put the rest of them in. So I think this is going to be a little bit better plan than just running right out and saying we need new switches. These switches are definitely cleanable. They're definitely usable. You just got to make sure you get the control cleaner in the switch, and you're never going to get enough control cleaner in this switch with it attached to this without drowning the whole radio. So give me a few minutes for that, and then we'll pick back up and see what kind of progress we've made on the micro switches here. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up, and we're fast forwarding down the road yet another week since the last clip was made. Apparently I'm trying to make a career out of this guy's radio here. But of course we ran into the situation where I didn't have the correct switches. At that point I removed them all, and I did clean each one of them individually with some of the MG Chemicals Super Contact Cleaner. And then from that point I sprayed some of that contact cleaner in this tiny bag and set the switches down in here, and they've been soaking for about a week. And so I don't think we're going to have any trouble with those. I'm sure they're going to be just fine, but the real delay was waiting on light bulbs. I did not have enough light bulbs to finish the front of this radio. There's 3 across the front. 2 of them were blown. My plan was to change just the 2 of them because I thought I had 2 in stock. I did not. I only had 1, so I just decided to order more, and we're going to change all 3 of them. So that's what we're going to start on now. We'll get camera mounted overhead, and then we'll start putting our switches back in. I'm going to take these out of the contact cleaner and get them dried off, let them get dried out. And then we'll go ahead and stick the first one in and check it and see if we have good switching between AM and FM. It should be instantaneous. You don't have to push hard. It should work immediately and work the way it's supposed to. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we can get finished up with part 1 so we can start on part 2 of the cassette mechanism, which will go much quicker than the rest of this project has went. This radio has suffered from a lot of age, and unfortunately, when you have intermittent problems, there's always the concern that, do I have it fixed, or is it just working right now? Last thing we want to do is send this guy's radio back to him, and then the FM drops out 3 days later. So got to do your due diligence to make sure that something like that doesn't happen. So let me go ahead and get these switches dried off, and we'll pick back up and we'll start putting them in. All right, let's go ahead and come back in, and we'll start putting in some of these switches here. Basically, we have all of our 9 switches all dried off. I went ahead and pulled the light bulbs out, all 3, and changed the little diffusers or lenses, if you want to call them that. These are rubber, and over time they will stick to the old bulbs, so you have to be careful when you're taking them off so you don't rip them, because they're really frail. So I got those off and got them put on our new bulbs. So we'll go ahead, I think we'll start off, we'll just do the 3 switches across the front, and we'll do the 1 bulb right there in that section. We'll try it out and see how it's going to work, and then from that point, if everything's a go, then I'll just put the rest of the switches and the bulbs in outside of the video. So let me go ahead, I'll get you zoomed in here, see if we can see a little bit better. Move those out of the way. And let's go ahead and we'll start with the first switch. And it's not going to break my heart to have this done and not have to be in this area right here working. This is kind of nerve-wracking working on this, just simply because I don't want to rip this freaking connector and have to work on that. So I want to get these switches set. And I do realize you can't really see what I'm doing there. So we need to probably move this out so I can get to what I need to get to. Let's see. Find one the pins aren't bent on. There's that. And here is the third one. There's the 2 right there. And then we got the 3rd one over here. I would say if these work, we shouldn't have any concerns with doing the others. Make sure these are set in place correctly. I'm pushing on the switch and holding this board while I'm pushing on it. And let's go ahead and do one of the bulbs too. This is actually the bulb that there wasn't anything wrong with. Let's see. Might need to remove a little solder from the hole there where I took the bulb out. There we go. Putting this bulb in, probably will have to solder up 1 lead so I can get it set, and then come back and kind of bend it into position where it needs to be. It needs to be resting over to this left side here like the other one was. Doubtful that this will stay in place. So I'll just go ahead and solder one lead of it up. Then put my finger on it and kind of push it into position. And there we go, right there. Let's go ahead and clip off the lead to that. And we'll solder up the second lead and get it out of our way before we start soldering on the switches here. And let's do this a little bit better too. There we go. Let's get this out of our way. Looks good. Shouldn't be any issues there. And we'll go ahead and solder up these three switches. I know one of them's for noise reduction for the tape deck, so that may not even work. But one's for local, so that should definitely work. Band and local should work. And we don't even need audio to try these. We just need to be able to turn the radio on. I went ahead and plugged the tape mechanism back in so it would function correctly. And we're going to go ahead and solder these three up real quick here. I basically just turn these over on a nice clean towel and let them kind of dry themselves off for a couple hours. And I do realize it's not the best camera angle, especially because there's a glare. The fluorescent lights are great, but they create issues with the camera. It doesn't like them. That should be it. Turn the power supply back on. And we should be able to see this. Let me see here. I'll zoom you out a little bit here so we can kind of get an idea. Let's go ahead and turn the radio back on. And when we push this, it should change right to AM, just like it does. We got a light on here, which turns on and off. These might still have just a little touchiness in them, but after I press them 3 or 4 times, they should be perfectly fine. That's just probably some of the cleaner in there still. But this is working way better. As soon as you push the switch, it will change. Just like it's supposed to. Don't have to even push it very hard. I don't know what this switch, oh, I guess this switch goes over here for the local and the distance. You can tell that they just need a little working, still just a little touchy there. This could be because there's excessive cleaner in the switch. Possibly. Because this one does trip when you push on it. This one's a different story here, though. This one's a little tougher. Did we get that one soldered in good? So it looks like it's soldered in pretty good. Yeah, well, we got these. There's no trouble here, but there is a problem with that one. So I think I will pull this one back out and have a look at it. But basically, that's kind of what we were wanting, to where you don't have to push hard. You can just do a momentary push on it, and it works like it's supposed to. Yeah, I think I'm going to hit these with the air compressor and see if there might be just some excessive cleaner in there, and that's what's causing the issue. I bet you that's probably what it is. I bet you there's excessive cleaner in them. All right, I'm going to go ahead and work on this a little bit, and then I'll bring you back and let you know what my findings are. If we don't get these worked out, we will get new switches, but I think these are fine. I think it's just probably maybe some excessive cleaner down on the inside. So let me look into that, and then I'll pick back up with you and let you know what I found out. All right, let's go ahead and come back in. I went ahead and reinstalled all the switches and the other lamps, or lamp. I believe there was only one I had to put back in. Anyway, they're all installed now. The problematic glitchy switches I was having trouble with, I moved those over to the memory position, cleaned them once more, and I think we're going to be just fine here. These are all working 100% better than they were before I started messing with them, and that's the biggest thing. We'll try them out real quick. I went ahead and set us some presets in the FM so we know that those are actually moving. So we'll start with the band switch to FM, and then this is the noise reduction one. This is going to be the metal tape or local switch. These are our presets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Of course, it's not going to be out of the realm of possibility that you might need to hit this switch twice, but I'm not so sure that you might not have to hit a brand new switch twice. So I think we're fine. I know these switches would not work even remotely close to as good as this did when I started messing with this radio and found out that I had to push hard and push these switches a lot to get them to change. So again, I think we're just fine. Didn't have to source any new switches. We could stick with the original ones that was in the radio, and I think we're going to be just fine. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and put this trim piece back on. We're going to try the tuner one more time with some audio just to make sure everything's working the way it's supposed to, and we'll call it a wrap on part 1 of this video. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up, and we're going to go ahead and go through the operations of the tuner and the front panel switches. Just for the sake of the demonstration, I went ahead and put the nose piece back on so you can see the illumination there. It's a little bright in this room, but the illumination works perfectly fine, and it's consistent all the way across the front of the radio. And got us hooked into the bench receiver, so we'll go ahead and turn it on, get some audio going. We're going to start off in AM, and we'll switch over to FM. And that was our noise reduction, and this is our metal tape, or local distant. And then I'll set us up some presets here.
Customers for just $20 a month.
So it all seems to be working pretty good. Absolutely, if you let this sit for too long without pushing any of those buttons, you might have to push them a time or two to get them to work, but they are working 100% better than when we started, because you couldn't get any of the features to hardly work without taking a screwdriver and pushing in the center of that switch. So I think we definitely made some improvements there. And as far as the tape deck is concerned, I'm hoping we'll have a little easier time with that. We had a little bit of work to do on this radio and these switches just because of all the age and the time and the elements it was setting in for so long. But hopefully we'll get a little luckier on the tape deck in part 2. So as always, I want to thank you guys very much. I appreciate you checking out the videos on my channel as well as this video, and I will catch you on part 2.